Hey everybody, I'm Ben Yee.
I'm Elissa Stein, and we're going to talk more
More
about
education. Who doesn't love education?
Do you know what? There are a lot of kids in the city who need to be educated well, and a lot of them aren't.
There's like 1.2 million students, in fact.
In just public schools.
Just
in the
public
city.
schools, that's right.
Right. And there are some schools that are great, and there are some schools that suck, and there are a lot of people who have ideas about how to change things up and maybe make things more equitable.
What's one of those ideas?
Well, a few years ago, the mayor had an idea, and I know about this well because when I was fighting for fair funding in schools, the mayor and the DOE came back and said, well, we're funding the renewal schools.
Yes.
And so there's not money to spend on all the other schools because we're going to take this 30 or so failing schools and plug hundreds of millions of dollars into
Something
them.
like 700 million.
Yeah,
right?
$750 million to change these schools around.
Yep.
And lo and behold, it didn't particularly work, and they're disbanding the system.
Slightly different from what I had heard, which is that they are ending the renewal schools program, but they are not shutting off a significant amount of the funding for the renewal schools. So even though they're getting rid of the status of renewal school, they are keeping a higher than normal flow of funding, and they are enabling those schools to continue to partner with nonprofits to provide additional wraparound services.
Yes. So basically, you're still having a renewal school program without calling them renewal schools.
Correct. And the idea here being that, so I guess there were two things.
Well, so what I just want to say about this, and how we brought it up, and then I want to hear a little bit more, is that when we're talking about the mayor and the chancellor changing schools up and giving more opportunities to all kids throughout the city about getting a good education, this was one way where they were pouring money and resources into lower income schools, which were not doing well.
Right.
And the turnaround, I mean, you had mentioned before that in elementary school it was better, in middle school
it was
not so
significant,
much.
in middle school you didn't see anything.
Right. But one would have hoped with all that money and all that attention, I mean, $750 million for 30 schools, that's a lot of money being poured in, that you'd expect to see massive change.
Well, so the idea of the renewal schools is to do this thing like this community schools philosophy, which was to make the schools more than just academic centers, but centers for the community and to provide wraparound services like dental care and health, psychiatric care.
Oh my God, I swear to God, we're always thinking the same thing. Right, but having all these things so that the community would use it as a gathering place, and school wouldn't just be this academic place, it would be a place for other people as well to get support.
That's right. So you'd bring in parents and you'd build that community of trust and engagement with the academic environment.
Involvement.
And involvement. Super important.
Because it's super important for people
to reduce truancy.
Right.
But one thing that really stood out to me when I was reading about this and doing research was that the psychiatric care component was a big part of it, and they had a lot of nonprofits come in and do counseling with kids. And so the boost that was seen in elementary school and grade school was significantly higher than in middle school, and it just made perfect sense to me that if you catch these problems early, obviously you'll have a larger impact.
Or have a constructive change.
And this takes us back, this ties right back into the last video we did about the high schools, which is the universal pre-K program. I thought was great because pre-K has been demonstrated to improve later outcomes.
Although there's tons of overcrowding, I heard, in problems in schools, but that's another video.
That's another thing. But the earlier you catch something, the better your investment will be. So when you come in later, and when you come in later, you get less and less return for your investment. And so going all the way to high schools and trying to meddle with that on the margins, not the greatest. Even running large programs for middle school might not have concrete results, even though we would certainly say, and many people have, that regardless of whether you saw academic outcomes, the other wraparound and healthcare outcomes you get for these children is worth doing anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in elementary school, there's
constructive change.
Constructive change, and students in the renewal schools outperformed a cohort of students not in the renewal program.
Okay, so you know what, Ben? I think that something I've known all along, but I think that perhaps other people in education who make the decisions should realize that, again, there are no quick fixes and there are no Band-Aids in this.
Right.
If you start, but this will be a process that will go on long after de Blasio is mayor and this chancellor will be gone, but you really need to work with younger kids, with families of younger kids, communicating better, educating kids better, building stronger educational centers when they're little, and that will carry them through so that all kids do have an opportunity to go to more academically rigorous high schools because they are prepared.
Right.
They're mentally prepared, they are emotionally prepared, they are academically prepared, but it's not going to happen when you slap somebody in a school classroom for 6 weeks over the summer before 9th grade and think that some magic transformation is going to happen and give them all those years
Right.
of the building blocks of education, because it's not going to work. And
Which
those
is-
poor children
yeah.
who are going to be the guinea pigs in all of this.
Which is not to say that there aren't programs which are valuable to run for older students and we should write them all off, but investing earlier is important.
Yes.
And thinking of a framework for providing support to to children who are in middle school and high school and moving through that phase of their academic life, finding the proper way to support them is more important than trying to drop them into particular schools or
Inappropriate
particular
locations.
programs.
Yeah. Nope. Okay, that was the most brilliant thing, and you should use this in your race. Is that it really is? It's recognizing.
Systemic.
Right, but recognizing the importance of taking care of
Yeah.
a child holistically and not put unfair expectations on them just because it'll make your optics look better.
Yeah.
But really what we should be doing is making sure that all children are treated well and getting the pieces into place. I know as a parent, when it comes to that, the
Yeah.
mental health support, especially in an increasingly
Absolutely.
anxiety-ridden environment, there isn't enough support. But getting those pieces in early and then knowing those pieces are there for kids as they travel along their academic path
Yeah.
will make such a tremendous difference. But nobody's thinking about that.
Right.
It's all thinking about these diversity optics and focusing on that little thing when we should really be thinking about how to put strong, resilient people
Right.
into schools and helping them stay that way.
Well, I mean, the education department thinks about schools, not children.
And on that note,
Laters.
see ya.